Mr. 96's Pop Reviews. My name is Mr. 96. Do I even have to explain myself? You all knew this was coming. BTS had a song hit number 4 on the Hot 100, so of course I had to make a review of it. If my past history has shown anything, it's shown that I'm ready to dissect any BTS song that charts high. While I may not be obligated to review every song of theirs, I feel as though it's almost a responsibility on my part. Each new single feels like an event, and like any event, there's always an interesting story to tell. And that takes us to their latest hit, On, from their most recent album, Map of the Soul 7, representing their 7 years as a group. Usually in my K-pop reviews, I like to give some large backstory to the artist for context, but considering this is my 3rd BTS review already, I'd rather not repeat what I've said in the past. You already know RM, Jin, Suga, J-Hope, Jimin, V, and Jungkook, and the only thing new I have to say about them is that my favorite BTS song changes on a daily basis. In the past, I used to think Save Me was my favorite, but nowadays, my favorite often flip-flops between I Need You as well as Euphoria, both of which hit very strong emotional highs. And when I need some sick flows, I'll probably jam to Persona, which has some of the best hip-hop production I've heard in recent memory. On the bright side, having multiple contenders for the top spot shows a consistent level of quality. Hell, I didn't even mention Boy With Love, and that one ended up being my number 2 best hit song of 2019. Interestingly enough, their most recent single ended up peaking higher than Boy With Love on the Hot 100 by reaching number 4. Was it deserving? Let's find out. Okay, interesting use of autotune. Perhaps they're huge fans of trap music? So what's this song about exactly? Oh, alright, it's supposed to be a motivational piece. They're talking about bringing the pain on as they're ready for any challenge that comes at them. For a group that's been together for about a decade now, they've had to work hard for everything they've earned, especially since they're the sole reason Big Hit Entertainment is even a player in the K-pop industry, so there's plenty to talk about when detailing their journey. If we're being completely honest, the lyrical content isn't the first thing we think of as English speakers, so while it's nice to do my due diligence and look up the translated lyrics, what wins me over with K-pop is the music. After all, plenty of people who love K-pop mainly do so for the aesthetic of the music. Occasional English lyrics may help, but the atmosphere, sound, and performances are what drive us through. And on that note, yeah, there's definitely a lot of appeal to this song. It's just unfortunate that I don't really like it. Oh, you thought I was automatically gonna give this a positive review because I'm the one person in our small music review community that likes K-pop? Yeah, no. I may be easy to read, but I'm not that easy. For example, I said about 2 years ago that I wasn't the biggest fan of Twice, but let me tell you, I've been listening to their song Fancy on loop for the past half year as it is absolutely fantastic. Way better than On at least. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about why On immediately dropped hard in the Hot 100 in its 2nd week, as that's more of an institutional topic on streaming and Billboard chart measuring tactics that Mark from Spectrum Pulse is way more knowledgeable about than I'll ever be. But with that being said, if you had just told me that On dropped 64 spots on quality alone, I would have had plenty of reason to believe you, as this is not something I'd want to play on loop. As far as BTS comebacks in recent memory go, this has got to be the most disappointing one I can think of. I know there are people out there who don't like DNA, but I absolutely love that song. While Fake Love isn't as great as I remember, I still very much like it. Okay, Idol wasn't the greatest song, so I guess you could say that was the most disappointing. Wait, no, even Idol is at least trying to be upbeat. It's an odd collection of noise that doesn't necessarily come together, especially the Nicki Minaj remix, but at least I can somewhat imagine it as a jock jam for the World Cup. For the record, BTS has released so many albums and EPs that I haven't listened to every single song they've made, but if we're just talking about their singles or any song that's big enough to have its own music video, I'm gonna have to say On is my least favorite so far. Now before you send me any death threats, just because I said it's the worst of their catalog does not mean I think it's terrible. BTS, in my opinion, has produced pretty high quality for a long stretch of their career, which is much better than plenty of artists who usually just have 1 or 2 good albums. Plus, we're talking about BTS as a group and not any of their separate solo projects. If we were, that Chicken Noodle Soup song by J-Hope and Becky G is easily the worst BTS-related project I've heard. ARMY can come at me if they want, but that shit was awful. As for On, no, I don't think it's awful or unlistenable. I just find it more underwhelming and wasted because the elements of a good song were all right there. Interestingly enough, I was watching BTS on Carpool Karaoke, and they just so happened to be singing On at one point. Yet here's the strange part. It sounded much better than the studio version. As for why it sounded better, that's an easy answer, as they didn't have to sing through that dreadful auto-tune. Seriously, what was the point of that? Jimin has a great voice and there's still a good song in there. I can see what they were going for, but it's just that the production sounds so overproduced and lackluster. And I know what some of you might say. They're just trying to show their more raw and emotional side, as a more clean and polished track might sound too artificial. Well, to that I say, nice try. I'm not against them making a brash tune about rising to the occasion when the going gets tough, because they made a way better version of this song before. Back in 2017, BTS released this song called Not Today. Like On, it's an aggressive tune about not backing down and showing what they're made of, but the music composition is so much more cohesive. The bass has way more punch to groove to, and the vocal mixing does a better job of highlighting their individuality. Seriously, if you want to listen to a bombastic and motivational BTS track, I highly recommend this one. Now I can hear some of you also saying that not every song has to be conventionally fun or upbeat for me to enjoy it, and you know what? I actually agree with you. Why else have I been listening to this song for the past 6 months? For the record, I've been listening to a lot of EXO recently, and even though this one may not be their best, it accomplishes its goal way better than On does. As you can guess from the title, Obsession does not fit the conventional definition of fun, as it's a very bitter song about telling your clingy ex to go f*** off. While it's not one I'd necessarily play every single day, it's definitely one I put on repeat whenever I'm in a bad mood, and if you're watching this in the year 2020, I think we've all been in a bad mood lately. So yeah, On isn't exactly a song I plan to come back to. The easy response would be to say that they should have pushed another song from the album as the big single, but the answer is not so simple. You see, Map of the Soul 7 is the follow-up to their EP, Map of the Soul Persona, but you may be wondering why a studio album would act as a sequel to an EP rather than the previous studio album. BTS is structuring their Map of the Soul series by starting with an EP, then adding new songs on top of that to make it a full-length album, so it's not exactly a true sequel with all new songs. Basically, it's like how artists release a new album only to release a completely new single later and add it to a deluxe edition or reissue to sell more records. Now you may initially think that's pretty cheap on the studio's part, but it's actually a common practice in the K-pop industry. In the West, an artist will promote a new album with many songs, and over the span of months and even years, they will release different tracks from the album as singles to prolong the album's relevance. Add in the extra promotion from touring and live performances, and this is what we generally call an album cycle. In South Korea, the big single from a new record is referred to as a comeback, so when you hear the word comeback in K-pop, it's not the same as here, where comeback is often used for artists who either reunite or return from multi-year hiatuses. Due to the sensationalized comeback nature of the K-pop industry, each new record is a major event, but that means prolonged album cycles as we know them don't really exist except for rare occasions. Audiences want new comebacks to celebrate within the year, so the industry can't just pick another track from the album to promote as a single, because once the album's out, everyone's heard it already. There's no novelty. I say all this because when you look at the track listing for Map of the Soul 7, there aren't many other songs you could push as the big single, because that's not how K-pop albums are designed. Hell, let's take my all-time favorite K-pop group for example. Just last fall, Super Junior had a major comeback with their ninth studio album, Time Slip, which was their first album in 10 years to feature their full group without missing members due to military conscription. Yet just a few months later in January, they released a repackaged version of the album called Timeless to promote their latest comeback, Iya Iya-O. As for Map of the Soul 7, it has 19 songs in there if you don't include the On remix with Sia, and of the 14 new songs that weren't on Map of the Soul Persona, a large majority of them are either solo cuts from individual members or songs in which only a few members sing. They're good solo cuts, but solo cuts nonetheless, so as far as group songs go, there weren't many options for the big comeback single. Honestly, I would have tried to push Black Swan harder than On. Sure, Black Swan is much more low-key and dark with its production, but at least it sounded interesting and experimental. If nothing, it's a solid Korean trap song. On sounds less experimental and more confused. It wants to incorporate a marching band, auto-tune crooning, and dark hip-hop beats all together without really understanding what makes each of those aspects work. I guess what I'm trying to say is that overall, I'm pretty disappointed that I couldn't like this song more than I do. I took some time making this review to see if my opinion would change, but it hasn't. They put their eggs in one basket and it didn't really pan out. It's really sad to see this dip in quality because Boy With Love was such a fantastically produced song. Honestly, most of Map of the Soul Persona had stellar production. To be fair, On isn't even the worst part of this comeback. Remember when I said their new album included 5 songs from Map of the Soul Persona? You see, Map of the Soul Persona had 7 songs, and the 2 songs that didn't make it onto the new album were Microcosmos and Home, 2 of the best produced songs on the entire record. If you want a real tragedy, there it is. Questionable decisions all around. I thought about giving On a 5 out of 10 since it's mostly pretty forgettable as well, but a 4 is more appropriate since the questionable production issues are really hard to ignore. Once again, I'm Mr. 96. If you want to see more pop reviews, click the subscribe button below and tap that bell to be notified when I drop a new episode. Honestly, as much as the charts have improved on average this year, that hasn't given me many interesting stories to talk about, especially since the real world has taken our attention. As we're currently stuck in our homes, I've been feeling a bit more nostalgic for the 2000s. I'm currently trying to finish Jack X, and Battle for Bikini Bottom Rehydrated comes out in about a month. While I'm in this mood, I think now is finally the time to get started on my top 10 worst hit songs of 2000. Pop songs may come in numbers, but there's only one. 96.
너의 그 말, 그 잔인한 말, 가슴 아픈 말, 칼날 같은 말. 너의 그 말, 그 잔인한 말, 날 울리는 말, 날 죽이는 말.